This is the Conscious Radio Network.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you might be on this spaceship we call Earth. Welcome to Conscious Radio Network's podcast series, Unlocking Mysteries of the Universe. I'm your host, Reverend Dr. Paul Meckes. If this is your first time tuning in, please click subscribe to the YouTube channel, like, share, and comment. You can also listen to this on Podbean, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Podcast, and soon Apple Podcast. This evening, our guest, Dean McMurray, the military medium, is an internationally acclaimed psychic medium, healer, dowser, and ordained minister. His story, so powerful and so authentic, is unlike any other psychic medium out there, and is why people from all across the globe are drawn to him for readings and personal guidance. So, what's his story? Why is he the psychic so many trust? Spending most of his childhood in northern Minnesota, Dean developed a deep love for nature and his country. That love of country inspired him to enlist and serve 24 years in the U.S. Armed Forces. Dean's service brought him overseas on several occasions, the last of which awakened his psychic abilities and set him on a new path in life. A mission, a new mission, a mission with new marching orders. We welcome Dean McMurray. How are you, Dean?
Hey, I'm well, Paul. Thanks for having me on tonight.
You are very welcome. And before I start anything, thank you, brother, for your service to the country, my friend.
Oh, thank you. Yes, thank you.
Very welcome. So, how did this all start?
Seems, I'm sure you've heard a lot of different stories over the years running your show, but yeah, just like the bio talks about is, here I did all these years in the military growing up, and you would think, a lot of mediums talk about knowing that there was something more or having these abilities since maybe the age of 3 or whatever, but that wasn't the case for me. I didn't grow up in a spiritual household. And even when I was in the military, it was, what I considered myself the very atypical guy. If I couldn't, shoot it or eat it or, or something that really didn't exist for me. And, but, it wasn't until my last deployment with the military, and really it was when I got back was the key turning point. When I returned, there was a lot of things ending and there was a lot of things beginning, and I'll explain here in a minute. So when I got back from my last deployment, a lot of what I call almost like poltergeist activity started happening in my home.
Yeah.
And what I mean by poltergeist activity is clocks and pictures literally started flying off the wall.
Wow.
And I, in the beginning, I was like, I must not have had the screw or the nail, in the stud, or, trying to put logic to things because, it just didn't make any sense to me at the time. And I was like, why would that come off the wall? There's no reason.
Yeah. And especially when something like that happens, we're always, the first thing is, okay, logic.
Right. You're trying to debunk why, the nail. And does it happen? Yeah. Sure, it happens, happens, many times. But at the same time, sometimes there's explanations that defy, logic. And, there was a lot of times where in that aspect of when I would look at these pictures and different things coming off the wall going, there's no way that should have came off the wall, a very complicated hanging system or whatever the case was. And, that the fastener was well into the stud or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, so you start thinking like, what is going on? Like that has to be lifted up and pulled out to come off. And so I had known, my wife confided in me when I was overseas that her and a bunch of girlfriends were seeing a local psychic in my area.
Hmm.
And I was jokingly referring to this local psychic as the voodoo chick. Now, she doesn't do voodoo, but it was my joking because, what we don't understand, we poke fun at, right?
Yeah.
And to make it so it's not freaky to us, right? And that's what I was doing. I was trying to make fun of it. But when all this stuff was happening, I was like, who do you reach out to? And I was like, Marilyn, turning to my wife, Marilyn, get a hold of the voodoo chick. There's some crazy stuff going on. I want her. And I didn't understand the process. Like, I thought, somebody working with the occult or spirits, I thought they just came over and, quintessentially waved their magic wand and everything went back to normal, but that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
And so she shows up at her home and starts connecting to my deceased grandfather, who, by the way, was a World War I veteran. Even though Grandpa and I were close, we weren't, chummy, say. And he was more of a man of his time. He was very quiet, hardworking gentleman. And, I was like, why is Grandpa here? Where was he after Bosnia? Where was he after Afghanistan? I'm going through my list of, 24 years, anybody in the military racks up quite a list of, I like to refer to them as my government sponsored vacations. It makes me feel better, but, and she quite honestly looked at me, Paul, and said, I don't know where he was then, but I can tell you that he's here now. And she gave me evidential information that, but at the time, my mind could not wrap around the fact that Grandpa was stepping forward, and why would he? And so I was missing all the information that she was giving me in this reading. And because my mind wasn't in, I wasn't in that mindset and I wasn't open. And so when she finished, quite honestly, nothing quieted down, nothing went away. And, actually things got, I almost want to say, louder, right? So the activity increased. And a couple of weeks went by since she had been there, and I was washing dishes around midnight of all times. And we had a newborn at that time. Our son was newborn. Our daughter was about 5. And I was washing bottles around midnight, and I just had this feeling wash over me, this knowing that my grandmother, quintessentially my grandfather's wife, right?
Yeah.
So, but I was very close with her. So my paternal grandmother showed up, and I just knew it was that claircognizance, a clear knowing that Grandma was with me. I had no doubts. And then, but out loud, I'm having a conversation with myself going, how do I know it's Grandma? And then, quite honestly, I'm replying to myself going, I don't know, but she's not here to hurt us, And then I'm like, oh my God, I'm answering myself. I'm losing it. But I'm trying to put, again, logic to it, going, you know what, Dean, you probably watched something paranormal, or, trying to, maybe the fear aspect or whatever, your imagination is going crazy. But I couldn't shake the knowing, just in my bones, that she was there with me. And I think, Paul, it's normal for anybody to communicate or start thinking, start talking in some manner, at least one way, at least I did, to, if somebody's there and that you love them, you had a connection with them. And that's what I was doing. Hey, Grandma, love you. And by this time I was actually in bed, because I was like, I'm probably imagining everything. I need to go to bed. And I'm laying there with my eyes closed, laying in bed, very much awake, but just laying there and having this one-sided conversation. Love you. What have you been up to?
Yeah.
And then my my ego, I refer to my ego as my drunk friend because, back in our younger days, we probably had a drunk friend that had, the best device in the world that you never want to take. And my ego at the time was like, you know what? This is all BS. This is just your fear speaking up. And if she's really here, she needs to prove it. And as soon as that thought left my head, it was an immediate, like a snap of the fingers, that the room turned absolutely frigid. And I was like, holy crap, I could really feel that. And I was like trying to figure out what that could be, and trying to wrap my head around this. And I'm like, maybe it's off peak power. The wife's got the fan on, right? Back to logic. Got to go back to logic, right? And otherwise it'd probably be too freaky, the reality of it, right? And and then my ego again goes, you know what? Let's put this all to rest. If she is really here, if grandma is truly here, she needs to touch me. She needs to, something physical. And grandma wasn't there to disappoint that night, because it was a gentle, firm pressure. It started at the top of my head, went to the bottom of my feet, and quite literally, Paul, pushed me into the bed. It felt like somebody was laying on top of me, honestly.
Yeah.
And I was like, holy bleep, 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 I was like, what is going on? And I thought, oh my God, I broke the fifth seal to hell or something. How do you shut it off? Trying to find the off button. And it was like the 6-year-old little boy in me came out and said, all right, grandma, see you. Love you. Love you. See you soon. Basically, you need to leave because you're freaking the what out of me.
Yeah.
And as soon as I said that, it was like a snap of the fingers again. Everything went away. The weight came off. The temperature came back to normal, and it was all immediate. And I sat up in bed, completely out of breath, covered in sweat, going, what the holy heck did I just experience? And I know what I experienced, obviously I know that, what I experienced, but at the same time, my mind was trying to conceptualize, like, what was that?
Yeah.
And my wife, so you remember I was telling you that we had a newborn. My wife has never slept deep, because I think it's just a mom thing, right?
Yeah.
And she was sleeping like I have never seen her sleep. And I was like, you need to wake up. There's somebody here. And she wakes up thinking there's somebody breaking in. I'm like, no, that would be too easy to, think, understand or conceptualize. And I said, there's like a spirit here. And she's like, how do you know that? And I said, I know, right? I said, you need to get a hold of Voodoo Chick. She needs to come over here. There's something crazy going on. And she's like, Dean, it's like 2:00 in the morning. You need to go back to bed. And I'm thinking, there's no way I'm going back to bed. And so, if I remember right, I watched TV for the rest of the night and end of the morning, and just, was dragging. But really for me, Paul, that moment was what I call my come to Jesus moment, my awakening. I needed something so visceral that the inner skeptic in me, not cynic, but skeptic in me, that could go, every time I would have an experience after that, would go, well, I'm not too sure about that. That feels a little hokey, or, not. And then I would always, it was almost like if grandma was standing behind me going, do you remember, when I came to visit you and your experience, and be like, well, yeah, I can't forget that. How about you just stay open? And every time I went back to that, of just staying open to have these experiences, whether it was a class, whether it was a reading, whether it was something, a paranormal experience, or even galactic. So, there's even aspects of further on in the journey of, dealing with alien stuff, is staying open in a regard of just understanding and observing and saying, wow, there's more than what I realize. And I'm like, having those holy crap moments.
Yeah.
And just kind of going back on, and really I wanted to understand, like, why I kind of went with the aspect of why me, why now? Because I wasn't looking to have this experience. I wasn't out seeking, paranormal, metaphysical, nothing of the sort. And like I said, my last deployment was not, the most traumatic thing about it would have been probably the separation from my family for the year. But it wasn't something that, I know there's probably people, well, maybe it was a psychosis moment or
Yeah.
latent PTSD or something. But my understanding is because remember, I alluded to, there was a lot of things ending and there was a lot of things beginning. And the things that were ending is I was in my last 3 years of military service. So my 24-year career with the military was ending. It was a big part of my adult life, since
Yeah.
graduating. And I'm like, holy crap, here I am, early 40s at that time. And like, now what am I going to do,
Yeah.
but I did have a plan of getting out and working for the VA and continue on my civil servant time. And then also the last of my 2 children were born. So there was an ending, kind of a cycle, but also little did I know that there was a bigger part of the cycle of a new beginning. And, as we always know, all of us, that with the ending, there's always a beginning somewhere. And what does that look like? And I thought it was transition from the military. Well, it was, that was
Yeah.
part of it, but it was a bigger part of this spiritual awakening and development of saying, trying to figure out who Dean McMurray truly is. Not because if you would have asked me years ago, Paul, like, how do you identify, other than your name, your given name? I would have said, my first thing out of my mouth would have said, I'm a soldier, I'm a husband, I'm a father, and I identify with these labels.
Yeah.
But when we start stripping them away, it was kind of like, who am I? Like, the inner reflection, and kind of felt a bit lost. But little did I know that starting this spiritual journey, I was, headed towards understanding myself at a level that I had never known. And so, yeah, and then it was, basically working with that local psychic, because I was like, I need to figure out what's going on, because now I'm like getting messages and
Yeah.
it was driving me crazy. And she said, well, you're a medium. And I said, I don't want to be a medium. Take it back. And she said, Dean, it doesn't work like that. And I was like, well, so she suggested a book. And for those of you that are readers, not that I'm connected to this book in any way, but it was just suggested that I read one of John Edwards' book, The Infinite Quest. It was a great book. And it's well written. But the crazy thing in it is John talks about, keeps on asking you, the reader, why do you want to be a medium? And every time I go, I don't want to be, and I was like, this is stupid. Why am I reading this book? Because I don't want to be anything that's in this book.
Yeah.
And so I went back to her after I finished reading it, and she said, well, how did that go? And I said, I'm more, mad at you than before. And I don't think I used the word mad. And I said, I'm frustrated is what it is. And I said, because I don't know why this is happening and where I plug into it. Like, if I am a medium, what does that mean for me? What does this mean for my life? And that was really a journey that took me well beyond even working with that psychic, in the beginning of just, figuring stuff out in the beginning. And I finally figured out that the reason this was happening, and what felt true to my soul, I guess, in the moment, was I was like, I was sitting and I was like, I totally get why it's happening, because I want to serve others at a bit, be part of something bigger than myself. And I
Yeah.
was like, that's why I joined the military. And I was like, that totally makes sense. Like, I get it, the VA, but you're only working with veterans, and not that that's anything bad. I think my soul was yearning to work with even a bigger, market of people saying, I need to help more. And so in that aspect, I was like, are you, and I kind of looking at like the universe and looking at, I'm like, are you flipping kidding me? Like, are you who's, am I being punked, and it's like somebody's getting a good laugh at this, I was thinking. And because, as I shared earlier, I had this big plan, 24 years in the military, go right in, early 40s. The kids are just young. And, I thought, God, I could do another 20 and be in my 60s. And, the kids would be about the right age. And I was like, because life continues even beyond the uniform. And I was like, but when that facade of what I had constructed in my mind fell away, I was like, what now? And it was like, it's okay. You're still going to work with veterans, but you're going to work with so many more people. Dean, you're going to work with people on such a bigger level you don't even understand or can conceptualize it yet. And so, which was scary for me because I was a planner, right? Obviously in the military, I had to have the plan. I had to have the blueprints map. And, it was like, basically the universe was saying, I got your back, but I was having a hard time trusting.
Yeah.
And so, thus I went on my journey of from taking classes, of figuring out, if it wasn't going away, I was like, how do I embrace it? And, understanding my gift and
controlling it.
And controlling it, absolutely, and boundaries and all the ins and outs. And so it was really wow that, I always say it's, in the early days, that last 3 years, it was really, truly Dean the Soldier by day and the Medium by night. To know, by the way, if anybody from Marvel Comics is is listening to this broadcast, and just hit me up. But it kind of sounds like some the alter ego or the other life, right? And sometimes it really felt that way because I realized when I started giving readings and people, and I wasn't charging in the beginning because I was like, God, my instructor at the time said, you need to do like a year of just readings, just get crazy with them and just figure out what, how it's for you. And that's what I did while I was still in the military. I was doing readings, scheduling whenever I could, on my time off and everything. But you also have to figure out, okay, the daughter's got a dance recital, the wife needs to go here, in between life and work, you put everything else. And that's no different, for me when I was, developing. And so, quite honestly, and then I started getting calls and texts, and I was like, who is this? And they were like, you don't know me. But I didn't have anything business related. I didn't have a website, no business cards. This was just me. And oh, by the way, like, I had just started. The only reason I was on Facebook a year prior to all this, and it was just for that deployment. So, I mean, my social media, knowledge and footprint wasn't huge. And so it wasn't like, ta-da, I'm out of the metaphysical closet, so to speak. And, it wasn't any of that. It was more word of mouth saying, hey, I'm doing readings and I'm having this experience. And so it was word of mouth, starting with family and friends, because you give them, people that and trust readings first. And then it spread. And all of a sudden I started getting calls from saying, well, you don't know me, but I'm friends with so-and-so and so-and-so. And they told me, that kind of thing. And so I started realizing, I was like, God, I need to schedule I bought an appointment book, right? I'll pencil you in at 2:30, right?
Yeah.
And so, and that was like, and the wife actually said to me, so when are you going to start doing this as a business? And at that time, when she sat, it really struck a chord with me because I felt that I wasn't going to be doing that because they still didn't really, I don't know. I guess there was an aspect of me that was still developing maybe.
Yeah.
And, and as time went on, it was about, I want to say about 6 months before I retired. Yeah, my 6, 8 months before I retired, did the whole business thing. And when I finally was ready to embrace that aspect, doing all the, registering business names and opening bank accounts and all that crazy stuff and, learning taxes and all that, was
Yeah.
like, holy cow, I didn't realize that there was, all this stuff involved. But the thing was, it was so natural, Paul. There was no and I was like, did I fall? Did I hit my head? Like, there was no, like, once I embraced it, there was no turning back for me. It was like full steam ahead.
Yeah.
I was sprinting forward because I couldn't wait to retire now. And anytime, and get me wrong, I absolutely loved every part of my military service, even the parts that weren't so, so joyous at times. But the thing that I would share is what I found in the last months. If there was an obligation, a military obligation that hindered me attending like something spiritual that I really wanted to do, like a class or do an event or something, it really irked me. Like I was
Yeah.
getting, when they say, when to retire because you become the grumpy old guy, as they say, and I really kind of became that in a sense because
Yeah.
I felt the push and pull. And I was like, wow, I really felt myself detaching from how I once recognized myself. And I was like, here's like a new part of me being
Huh.
born. And I was
Yeah.
like, remembering of like who I am. And I'm like, this is so crazy. It was so foreign. And, it is crazy to think that was 11 years ago.
Wow.
And I'm like, this is nuts. And I mean, 11 years is not, a crazy amount of time. It isn't. However, for a lot of people listening there, that have their own experience, it seems like so much happens in a short amount of time that you feel like you're 90 years old by the time. And it's like, everything you're shoved through the eye of the needle and everything is happening at 100 miles an hour. Everything's accelerated, it feels like.
Yeah.
And at
Yeah.
least it was for me. And I was like, God, has it been like 12 years? And then that was like, no, it's been 8. It's like,
Oh
oh my
wow.
God. And so yeah,
Yeah.
and it's and as I know you're aware as well, but and as once you start going down that rabbit hole in any direction, wherever you start, just other doors open, other people step forward. And next thing you know, I was taking a class in dowsing, got involved with remote viewing, just all the, and I know there's so many other people out there, that you get into these other modalities that you have an interest in or you start exploring. And it's so fascinating that, and you start connecting with other people and networking and finding out about, all this other stuff.
Yeah.
And it's just like, whoa, I gotta slow down. It feels like, the excited little puppy with a tennis ball, and
Yeah.
it's like, but and that's the fun part. I think regardless of what you do, if you don't love it, then maybe it's time to explore something that you do love. Um, but that's one of the things that I loved that I still love about it is you getting that, I call it an energy high, but like getting excited about things and
Yeah.
hearing I love over the years, and here I get the honor and the opportunity to share my story. But the cool thing is like, hearing other people's stories and see them getting excited and watching them develop themselves and be like, oh, that's so exciting,
Yep.
so yeah, so it's been a crazy, but so fun. And so it's, and I never know what's going to be. I think every day it's kind of like, how can I serve today? And I think that's
Yeah.
really what it boils down to, because I never know, like, years ago it was, I got a call to show up at a hospice unit in my area,
Mm,
and there was a dying veteran, and his family wanted, basically to get some validation that he was going to a good place. And, so yeah, did reading for him and the entire family. That was just kind of a unique, it was such an honor though to be there for that stage of his life,
yeah.
and there for the family. And then once he eventually crossed over, I think it was several weeks later, then they asked me back to, make sure, hey, he's doing okay and everything went well and all that great stuff. So it's, it is really, it just blows my mind, when to do readings
Yeah.
and to be a small part, to get to play a small part in somebody's life for however long we sit together. And
Mhm.
that to me is truly an honor. So
Yeah. Um, without giving too many details on the
yeah.
subject or the client, um, can you maybe discuss on or share your experience on your very first reading you did with somebody,
Ooh,
and
yeah.
the most substantial?
Well, I can share a couple. Thinking back, so when I was first doing readings, bringing people into the home, in my well, I'll call it the practice. When I was practicing,
Yeah.
and it was actually a family friend. So was, and I have her permission to share this story. So it was so funny, and I was connecting, and this lady stepped forward, very attractive, was wearing a sundress. And if I remember right, she was like in her 30s or 40s, right? And as she appeared to me. But when I saw her, I was like, okay, I see you I'm seeing her in my mind's eye.
Yeah.
And I'm getting all this prior to relaying this to our friend. And then, without warning, this lady in spirit lifts up her dress, exposes her bare butt to me, and slaps it, gives me a wink, and goes, "How you like that?" And I'm like, my jaw, like, oh my, did I? And I turn beet red, and I'm like, oh my God, did I really just see that? And I was like, how do I explain? And I was like, and I was like, okay, I need to compose myself. And I was like, okay. And I just, I was like, just take your time and explain exactly what you saw. And I said it very carefully. And I said, now I'm going to tell you exactly what I saw. And I said, this might sound really out there, and as soon as I said, I described her as best I could, and I said, then she lifts her dress and smacks her butt, and and everything, and she started crying. She goes, "Oh my God, that's my aunt so and so." And I was like, "Oh my God, I can't make this crap up." Like, I was like, here I'm having spirits moon me. And evidently she goes on to validate how her aunt was a bit of an exhibitionist,
Yeah.
and she would go, with a family or whatever, swimming. And how some girls, if they were to change in a public area, the other girls maybe make a little privacy ring with
Yeah.
towels. No, not her. She would be one that would strip right there. She does, it's nothing they haven't seen before. And I was like, oh my God. I said, that totally, I said, I said, she's a sweet soul, but I said, wow. I said, what a firecracker. I said, she is a unique individual. And there was another one, in my first, one of my very first, actually my very first public reading. I was super nervous. And I was actually at an old local rock shop, a metaphysical shop.
Yeah.
And I was kind of in the back room. It was one of the kind of give you that hippie amethyst. I mean, they had geodes and rocks all over. And it was just kind of it was actually a couple old homes that they had moved together to make this rock shop. And they gave readings. And so, so this lady comes in and she was like, and she was really kind of in my face about it. And she was like, I'm here for a reading. I'm thinking of a name and I want you to, tell me that name. And I was like, well, it doesn't work like that, but we'll do our best. And I was so nervous because, again, my ego was like, I don't want to let her down and I want to do well. It's my first one, right? Out in public, outside of the comforts of my home.
Oh yeah.
And so I was like, I just felt like this block, like this performance block. And all of a sudden, something, it was like either it was my ego or maybe my spirit guide. It was like somebody whispering, going, just say F it. And I was like, what? And it was like, yeah, just say F it. And I was like, okay. And then, so in my mind, I set it up, said it. And in that moment, I still tell my students to say that and in that moment, I was able to let go of the emotional outcome that I wanted. And so I just felt relaxed. Like, and for a moment, I just didn't, like, the heck with it. And so, and I was able to connect and I was like, well, I don't know about a name, and then I started getting all this information and, like initials. And I said, I don't get a name, but here's, talking about this necklace and, the letter L and da, 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 da. And, quite honestly, she left and she actually, her jaw hit the table. She was like, that is so freaky. And I was like, well, I'm sorry, I didn't get your name, the name for you. And she was like, no, that was really good. And I guess I freaked her out anyways. And I was like, but I just think about, and that really was interesting because that reading is still special to me because it still makes me, it's a great reminder to myself that to not have an emotional connection to the outcome of the reading, because if I do that, then I'm filtering. Then I'm trying to control the flow of information, and then it just, the whole reading just kind of goes, it's screwy. And, but I found over the years of giving readings that, just, give what you get, even if it's, remember the lady mooning you? Hey, just give it, But I'll also share another one because it's really funny, is that I was giving this was going back probably 3-4 years ago. And I was in the western part of my state and I had a nice little gallery, public gallery. And I was up front and I was just in my mind before I started, I was just standing there nice and quiet, asking spirit. I said, hey, can somebody step forward with something very unique so we can start this gallery? And I said, so maybe something funny or something very evidential. And there was this sweet old frail lady she passed in her 80s. And she's just so short and sweet. And she come up and grabbed my hand and she was like, oh, sweetie, she goes, you just bring up the family joke about baked beans and fruit salad. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, oh my God, I am going to listen to this lady about a family, a lady in spirit about baked beans and fruit salad. And I'm like, either I'm going to be the laughing stock or this is going to be really interesting.
Yeah.
And so I described the lady who was stepping forward in spirit. And I said, she tells me about a family joke, an ongoing joke about baked beans and fruit salad. And there was a lady in the crowd. I think she was in her 30s or so. And she kind of did one of that's me. Like, I don't want to be first, but I can validate with that. And I was like, well, how can you validate this person? And she goes, well, that lady clearly is my grandmother. And I was like, okay, very cool. And I was like, so everybody's wondering what's the family, joke? And she was like, I'm not quite sure about the baked beans, but she goes, the fruit salad she's talking about is very clearly talking about my aunt who is still living. And she goes, every family get together, she makes fruit salad. And I was like, okay, you got everybody on the edge of their seat. What's the big joke? What makes it funny? And she goes, she waters it down. And I was like, ooh, why would you do that? And she goes, because she believes it makes it diet when she does it. And the whole room just erupted and like, oh my God, that is so funny. And I was like, oh my God, that is just validation to me that you cannot make this stuff up. Like, why would, and I'm like, about fruit salad. And it was so funny because fast forward a few months and I had the honor of being the featured psychic in Minnesota at a paranormal convention doing the gallery. And there was about 500 people at the casino. And it was just a great group of people. And one of the first things, I start off, I just love when I do galleries, public galleries. I love talking about that sort because number one, it's funny. And number two, it just, kind of puts people in a frame of mind saying, how sometimes, stuff will come through like that. And so I talked about it. And so, right, in the beginning. And so I get in, and the first person that validated with the spirit that I was pulling forward was this gentleman. I had never met him. And so I give him his reading, and he said, and he had the microphone, and he goes, before I sit down, my wife wants to correct you. And I was like looking at him kind of weird. And he was like, yeah. And there was an aspect of the story about the fruit salad, I call it the fruit salad lady, that I had off, over the years. You get a little the details off. Yeah. And she corrected. And I was like, oh my God. And it was here. He was the husband of the lady that I had read. And they had both come to the event, this paranormal convention. And out of 500 people here, and I didn't even realize it. And I was like, oh my God. I said, I am not paying these people to show up. I said, honestly. And I said, that is so funny. But I said, that's the way spirit works, right? And I said, that is the magic of galleries. And I said, that is so cool. So, but yeah, for sure. It's interesting. I think one of my favorite things, even though I love doing like one-on-one readings, whether in person or through, I do a lot of Zoom and everything. Yeah. But I just love the power and the of galleries. These public galleries, whether they're virtual or not, but, it just has something about it that, if I'm giving one individual a reading, how it can touch so many other people. And I remember in other previous galleries, so many people coming up to me going, oh my God, when you were talking about that Christmas tree, and then they just validate. They're talking about validation, and then the next person comes up to you, the same thing, and they validate it. And I was like, that's the cool thing about galleries. I was like, I might have been reading this gentleman or this lady, but I said, it has a way of touching you and touching somebody else. And I said, that is the healing power of where, even if you don't get read, it's like, oh my God, he was talking about, I have somebody, I think you were reading my stuff. And I was like, that's the cool thing about it. And I was like, so yeah, it's always, and I always find too, for me personally, it's like a continually learning, like, wow, that's just so cool. Continually being in amazement of, things around, like we're able to do this. Yeah. We're able to talk to people that have crossed over. We're able to, commune, with higher consciousness. We're, consciousness doesn't end with death. It doesn't end with what we understand is within our universe. We can, and where I kind of took it was, I was like, talking to dead people's fine. It's great. It's healing. I love it. But I was like, what else? I was thinking of that, kind of being in that inquisitive state of, you think of like I kind of put myself back at like when I was 6 and kind of poking at stuff, kind of being, like, what else can that frog, like trying
Yeah.
to explore, and you're, being in that state of, if we have this thing called intuition, what can we do with it other than, tell us if somebody has bad vibes or not, or, how can we use it to leverage, I know, Paul, you brought up real estate a little bit earlier before we came live, kind of figured out with, using intuition and dowsing, like, and some other modalities, how can I use that to help accentuate the sales of homes? What I call like intuitive real estate consulting.
Yeah.
How can you, as maybe a corporate CEO, how can you use your intuition? And it doesn't have to look all woo woo, but how can you use it in everyday life? And
Yep.
what does it look like for you? Because, somebody listening might be a police officer. They work as a plumber. They might be a school teacher, nurse, doctor, whatever. How do you use it? And, it's going to look different for everybody else, but, again, it starts with listening, but, and that was a big journey that I went on as well after I kind of got really comfortable where I was, speaking to dead people and such. And I was like, what else is there? What other rabbit holes could I, run down and
Yeah.
explore? And I think that's the fun part, because it never ends. Like, where do you want to go? What do you want to experience? And I think that's the cool part. So
Yeah. And I don't think our listeners caught this, but before we started the show, so you're living in North Dakota?
yeah, currently I'm in North Dakota. Yep.
Okay, North Dakota. Okay, because we were chatting before we went on the air, and I picked that up. So just in case for those who are eventually going to see this and then listen to it later on any of the podcast networks, if you're in the Dakotas, you can check out or get in contact with Dean, and I will share verbally the email, which is www.themilitarymedium.com.
Right.
And it's also scrolling below the screen.
And I would also add to that, you don't have to be in the Dakotas to connect. I was doing a large majority of my business virtual
Remotely.
before COVID even was a word. And
Yeah.
so, several years before that even came around, I was doing things on Zoom and Skype and stuff. So,
I'm thinking
and
we
I
could
connect.
probably schedule a live show. Come back on when we
Yeah,
have one of our Monday live shows and do
that'd be fun.
a mediumship session.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. We take calls too. So for anybody who
That'd be
wants to
fun.
call into the show, I normally give the number. Actually, let me bring the number down there. So anytime anybody wants to call into the show on Monday nights at 8:00, you can just call the 407-636-1157 number. But they can also find you at, you said these two websites are technical, they'll take you to the same place, but you can also find Dean at deanmcmurray.com. And it's
And if you forget,
MCMU.
you just Google military medium or Dean McMurray. It'll come
I think
up. And
I think the military medium's a lot easier.
yeah, the military medium, right? Yeah.
Because the A in your last name can be easily missed.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It can be. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me bring the
But it'll get there. It'll get you there. So
yeah.
for sure. And then about almost every social media platform, you just look up the military medium and I'll pop up. So
Cool.
as well. So
Cool.
for sure.
So you have any Any publications coming out? Are you working on a book? You working on any material for publication?
So yeah, so I think I need to change that on my bio. That book has been was it a kind of one of those love lost type projects. I don't know. It's been on again, off again for a number of years, and now it's back on the horizon as far as maybe a winter project.
Yeah.
So it's something definitely I know that I'm feeling more of an urgency. I'll say maybe the universe is saying, Dean, would you just get off your butt and do it?
Yeah.
So do I have currently a book? No, I don't. I am slowly, ever so slowly, like molasses in January, working on a book, but for sure it's eventually the plan is to have one kicked out. So and I know that there'll be more than one once it does start rolling. So
yeah, books are like tattoos. You can't just have one.
right. Right. Absolutely. No.
Yeah, man. I tell you, I say this at every show, man. An hour goes by so fast.
I know, right? It's even when we do like our sessions, it's like we come to the end of the time and it's like, oh, as we wrap up and it's like, oh man, that was an hour already. And
Yeah.
it's like you just start chatting and it goes so quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. I'm trying to think. So, do you have any traveling thing? Do you do any work out of the state? You got
I
anything,
do.
any big projects coming up?
Yeah, so we're working on a few things. Working with some folks about perhaps a tour. I can't say anything for sure as far as like in a city near you type
Yeah.
deal. But one of the things I would share is if somebody out there is listening and be like, I would love to have Dean come to my city or my town or whatever, reach out to me. I'm open. We'll have a discussion. I'm the guy on the other end of the line. So if you email me or message me, I'm the dude. It's not like I have an admin assistant at this point. But
I might actually set something like that up. I'll talk to one of the directors of the expos with the Spirit Fest that we put together here in the state of Florida.
Oh, that'd be lovely.
I'll have her reach out to you and see if you can work something out.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah. Expos, symposiums, whatever. And even like speaking. I've done keynote. Believe it or not, I was actually I'm in as we mentioned before, I'm in Eastern North Dakota. And it's more of a conservative, even though the holistic, I'll call it the quote unquote holistic community of mediums and healers and such is growing.
Oh,
however, it's still pretty conservative. And I was actually asked by a friend of mine to be the keynote at a conference for nonprofit fundraiser folks. I know, so weird to have a psychic medium, but he was like, it's so crazy because what I talked about was leveraging your intuition to accentuate in business. So like, because we all have it, like, how can we use it and for them, it was the nonprofit world. Like, how can we use it, to accentuate whatever you do? So whether you're a nonprofit, fundraiser, whether you're, doing whatever. And it was interesting because how well it was received, because people didn't look at it as super woo woo, right? And when I use the word woo woo, I'm thinking most people get it, that it wasn't, I didn't go all the way like metaphysical, but they can understand, like, of course I did use the aspect of, hey, I am a psychic medium, but I'm not here to do readings today. That's not why I'm here. It's to talk about this God-given ability called intuition. And like, if we have it, like, how can you use it? And you're probably using it, you just don't realize it. But the thing that I found, Paul, is a lot of the successful people in business and the people that everybody said, oh, no fair, they're getting ahead or whatever. They're just learning how to leverage all their tools
Yeah.
and they're listening. And so, I'm like, why not use something that you have? It's like, I always say it's like finding the 10 millimeter socket that you're always looking for, in the toolbox. It's like, if you have
Yeah.
all these tools in your toolbox, why not use it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've had a lot of clients during paranormal investigations when I started years ago. And I'd say probably 8 out of 10 of them were mediums, but they didn't know it.
Yeah.
They had these gifts.
Yeah.
And when we realized during the investigation through mediumship and through technical aspects and investigation, we let them know. I was like, hey, that's one reason you're experiencing all these events is because you're open to it.
Right. Whether you realize it or not, right? I don't want to be a medium.
Exactly.
Somebody else. I don't want to be a medium.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, we're teaching them and consulting them and to let them know how to tap into that if they choose to.
Right. And well, in the real deal thing, when people go through that, it can actually be scary for some. It can be downright. I've had clients that have come to me. One client that came to me and she was like, I think I'm being like possessed.
Oh.
And she said, I'm being physically manipulated, like where they're shaking me. So when I connected, I was like, I don't feel anything, malevolent. I don't. And I said, and I started, checking further. And I was like, you have gifts, that there is something huge, that they weren't hurting her, but they were like trying to shake her foot, like, and it's very scary. Like if you've never had that experience, and it's like out of the frying pan into the fire, right? And like, oh my God, like, so yeah, I completely sympathize with those that are going through that. And when people go, tell me I'm not crazy. Well, I'm not a psychologist, but I will tell you that, there's a good majority of folks that are going through a spiritual experience that is probably, got their guard up and be like, what the holy heck is going on? And it's, I get it. So for sure. And, and the other thing that I'm really passionate about too, is when we talk about people having those kids, when they're having, these kids trying to understand what it is that they're experiencing, and I'm sure you've run into that, Paul, and so, these kiddos that are super sensitive and can either see, or communicate with, or whatever spirit or whatever is going on, here, they don't even know the words sometimes to, there's a bad man or something that freaks them out because it's not a family member, and they don't, or at least they don't, know that it's anybody that's known to them. It could be a grandpa, a great grandpa that's standing in the corner of the room and like, who the heck are you? And be like
a family member who had passed prior to their birth, they wouldn't have known.
And I so many things. I know there was a lady talking about her son. We had a chat over the phone. Her son was seeing bees in his closet. And so what he would do, and he wasn't particularly verbal. I can't remember if he was on the autism spectrum or not. But he was using everything that he had in his room, like toys and stuffed animals, and he was trying to build a barrier. So he closed the door to the closet, and then he would like try to block the door, and in an attempt to block blankets, all that kind of stuff. And I said, so do you have bees? Did you have it checked out? Because that could be a real thing, something in the attic or eaves or somewhere. And she goes, no, we had an exterminator. We had it completely checked, everything. there are absolutely no bees in the home.
Huh.
And I was like, interesting. And really what it was, his fears being manifested in an aspect. I don't know why bees for him. Maybe it was something that was scary.
Mm.
Or maybe he got stung at some point, but where bees would actually manifest. And until we came up with a system for that family to empower, that kiddo, that saying, the bees stopped coming. And it was really interesting. So here, kind of, I always call it the case of the paranormal bees, right? So here, this fear is physically manifesting what he understands as bees. And because that's what the fear was, like, oh, that makes you fearful. So that's what we're going to do. And it was really kind of interesting, is like, wow, like, bees showing up, like, and yeah, so we had to, and with kids, it's a different dynamic, because you have to, it's, come to them at their level and their understanding, and saying, okay, let's empower you. Let's take away the fear, but also give you some tools, because so you can, cope with this thing.
Yeah.
And so, if it happens again, you can, in a sense, stand in your power and, not be fearful. So it's not happening continually. Be like, oh my God, now I got bees feeling, so,
Yeah.
but yeah, I know there's so many crazy, crazy stories about how things like are different for everybody. And that's what's cool. That's the cool part, that I think that there's never one case or individual that's the same. Stories could be similar, but everybody's different, whether they're manifesting it themselves, whether it's something that's attached to the home, the land, whatever, or it can be, especially in our area of the country, very rich in Native American heritage.
Oh yeah.
Early settlers, of course, all of the United States. But there was a lot of skirmishes here and different things. And so a lot of challenges that, you kind of go through that layer, but it's so fascinating. Like when it's almost like you got to take a course in history, and it's like,
Yeah.
wow, it's like and that part to me is super fascinating, because I just find myself learning so much more that I would in any other aspect of life. I'm like, whoa, I didn't realize that, this area was actually used for such and such,
Yeah.
or, and it's like, whoa, no, that wasn't in the history books, or, like,
Yeah.
yeah, they don't want, yeah, nobody
Like
wants to revisit
like
that part of history.
yeah. Like for instance, I mean, I wasn't even doing an investigation. I was just chilling out down, just downtown Claremont. This historical small town,
Sure.
and there's this restaurant upstairs and a bar downstairs, and a little tiny, really tiny place. But I didn't realize that on the very, very top floor, the third floor, is where there's a couple apartments, and
Mm.
a couple of the tenants kept, a certain, only a couple people would talk about it. But
Sure.
those couple people would always, came to me because they knew I did this work,
Right.
and they're like, "Yeah, I just wanna let you know that every now and then we'll see a couple people walking through the building, but they're not there. We'll turn and they're not there, and
Yeah.
they'd see apparitions all the time." And then I realized, through somebody who has lived in the city for a very, very long time, said, "Oh yeah, that building used to be the morgue."
Oh, wow.
And the hospital was right across the street, so they
Oh,
bring the
man.
bodies here, and then they'd wheel them across the street into the hospital, but the hospital hasn't been there in years.
Right. Long gone.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, you bring a great point, Paul, is that developers don't care. They
Nope.
don't care about the history. They don't care. Like, I also worked on a spot that was actually a reclaimed landfill. And by the EPA standards, it was fine to build on, but it was capped, and had methane pipes coming out of it way in the back. As long as they're clear by whatever it was, they don't care about that. They just, build another building, bottom, the bottom line is, we don't care that there was an Indian burial ground here at one time, or there was a so they don't get into that aspect. And so one of the things is very interesting that, when people, like you talked about, having here's this new building, having every once in a while somebody, see somebody walking around and be like, wow, finding out like the morgue, like, hello, it's like, let's address that. It's like, whoa.
And where they cook the food, part of the kitchen was part of the morgue. And it's like, if people knew, if the patrons of that restaurant realized and heard that, they would have lost their customers.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Regardless whether it was like 60, 70 years ago.
Right. Well, right. And, I think, honestly, I believe that happens much more than what we realize. And like you said, that's very common. Like there's only a few people, like even if there's quite a few people that are experiencing it, there will be only a few people that maybe talk about it, and they talk about it in hushed tones. You're like, well, because they don't want to be that person or that guy, right? And be like, oh my God, I don't want this to get around, but there was a dead person, and be like, and they come to, like yourself, or, I even had that. There was a guy that I used to work with in the military. And when I retired, so in the military, there was mixed emotions. Like when I came out of I'll say the metaphysical closet, right? I came out of the closet right before I retired, like months. And I was like, I don't care. What are they going to do? Bend my dog tags, make me retire. And I said, I'm going to be a medium. And some people were quite literally really inquisitive, like really interested. Other people turned around and walked away. Other people were like, I'm going to pray for you. So, it was like mixed emotions. And there was a guy, he was kind of indifferent to it. There was a lot of people thinking, oh my God, McMurray's been in the military way too long. He lost it. But it was so funny. He reached out, and it was a number of years after I retired. And he goes, hey, you still hunting ghosts? I was like, well, I guess I never really was, but I was like, sure, why not? Whatever, in his aspect of his understanding. So I was like, yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm still hunting ghosts, talking to people. And he was like, I have a friend that is having problems, with, he says, a ghost in his house. And I was like, oh, cool. I said, that actually very common problem. And, not a lot. It's like having, like having a rodent problem. It's like, oh yeah, real common. Like, it's not a big deal. And I was like, well, here's my info. Have him get a hold of me. And I never did hear from the guy, but I was like, I found it interesting that even the people that kind of, I never got shunned, but it was the aspect of even people that kind of go, oh, I think they went off the deep end, or kind of get quiet because they're not really sure what the heck you're doing. But then when they start experiencing something, right? And I reflect back on that, because I'm like, oh my God, now I'm the voodoo chick. Like I'm the voodoo guy, like, right. That psychic that I always joked about. And I'm like, now I'm the voodoo chick. And I was like, but in reality, and every time, we don't get yellow pages much anymore, but every once in a while we still get a phone book, I guess. And I've looked through those. Nowhere in there is there anything about parasite, nothing about
nothing
metaphysics,
paranormal, nothing metaphysical, nothing psychic.
No. And I'm like, why? And I was like, because, the old, the Ghostbuster, who are you going to call? Right. And I was like, but, great for websites because you can just Google,
Oh yeah.
psychics
Yeah.
near me or whatever, and up come your Google results. But before that, like, if you didn't know who to go to, like, if you didn't travel in those circles, who do you reach out to? You just suck it up and be like, oh my God, I've been haunted for, there's been this old lady that sits in the rocking chair. I didn't want to make her mad, so I just left the rocking chair there. Here it is, maybe her old farmhouse that was added on, all these kind of crazy things. But I just think it's how, but I really have to say that I think society as a whole it's because of all the TV and everybody having shows and all that, it's making it more normal to talk about it openly. And it's I think, which is good. I think there's an aspect of it that needs to people need to discern for themselves, like what information to go with, because there's so much of it now. And there was like an explosion of not only paranormal, but psychics and mediums, which is great. I think more people need to embrace that aspect. I'm a big encourager of that.
Yeah.
However, at the same time, I always say, well, be careful what you wish for. Like, why are you doing what you're doing? Because you can't unknow stuff. Like, when you start going down these rabbit holes, like, and I don't want to paint an ominous picture by any means.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is just be really clear on your intent and what direction you want to go, because you can't unknow things. And even if you end up going a different direction, like, ooh, I don't want to go over there because, I know this, you can't unknow that. And, once you start uncovering stuff, it's like, well, here we are. It's like, it's kind of an interesting chain of events that it's like, whoa, how did I find myself here? And but for sure.
Well, we're gonna have to wrap it up. Let's see. Yeah, let's definitely want to have you back on for a live.
That'd be great, Paul. I'd love to come on and do
get some callers and some.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
And chats and stuff like that and whatnot.
That'd be great.
Yeah, cool. Well, brother, thanks again for your service to the country.
Well, thank you
very, very much. For those who this is the first time watching, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. And thank you for watching Conscious Radio Network. We do have our live shows on Monday night at 8 p.m. It's called the Weekly Seance, interestingly enough. and obviously Unlocking Mysteries of the Universe is our recorded show, which we try to publish at least twice a month, every other week. And thanks again, Dean, very much. Blessings, my friend. And until next time, I'll keep you up to date on some of our openings for August.
I would love it. Sounds
awesome.
Great. Thanks, Paul.
Cool. You have a wonderful evening. Thank you, everybody, for watching Conscious Radio Network. You all have a good night, and y'all take care. Thank you. Can you still? Yeah. Emma. Yeah.
Still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. Where in the heck is my video? Why is it still recording? That is weird. Oh, that's why it's recorded. If it was live, it'd be a whole different story. Come on, why is it still showing it's recording? No, it doesn't matter. I'll just clip it. What's crazy too is it's not even showing our videos, so. Normally it does.